The hospital waiting room hummed with restless energy as Neka cradled her teenage daughter, Amina, in her arms. Just a week ago, Amina had been fine, laughing at memes and chatting with friends. Then, the cough started, slow but persistent.
"Doctor, please help my daughter," Neka pleaded, her voice cracking. When the cough began, I used the AfriHealth app. I told it about her fever and chest tightness. She held up her phone as if it were evidence. "The app said it's just a seasonal cold. Rest and water will fix it," it told me. I even used the app's chest x-ray feature, and it said her lungs were clear. It said drink plenty of fluids and sleep, she repeated. Dr. Ebuka's brow furrowed. He knew Amina's condition very well. Her history of heart issues wasn't something an app should have missed. As he examined her pale, wheezing frame, his concern deepened. Pneumonia. Again. He barked instructions to a nurse to start antibiotics immediately. Hoping to make sense of the situation, he opened Amina's AfriHealth records. What he found made his stomach drop. Her profile now displayed a history of strong pulmonary health. Even worse, the app had recommended discontinuing her heart medication altogether. Dr. Ebuka leaned back, his jaw tight. This wasn't just a minor glitch. This was negligence. Amina wasn't his first patient today to suffer from the app's failings. She was the third. And she joined 15 others from this week alone. "What kind of world are we living in?" he muttered, "where trusting technology can mean life or death. And who will pay for this fatal flaw?" Yeah. The thought burned in his mind as he turned back to Neka, who was watching him with desperate eyes. He knew what had to be done. AfriHealth could cost a life, he whispered to himself. I have to report this to the medical board before it's too late. Welcome to our channel where we read African short stories written by us for you. Please enjoy, subscribe, and leave us a comment of where you are watching from. Now let's begin where it all started. The fluorescent glow of Dele's desk lamp cast long shadows across the sleek black surface of his workstation. Lagos hummed in the distance, a symphony of honking cars, faint music, and the sporadic calls of night vendors. Dele barely noticed. His eyes were glued to the screen displaying the AfriHealth AI dashboard. The app's interface was crisp, modern, a testament to months of relentless coding, troubleshooting, and sleepless nights. Tomorrow, we change everything, he whispered to himself, leaning back in his chair. His fingers trembled slightly as he traced the app logo on his phone. For a moment, he closed his eyes, remembering the face of his younger brother Yemi, a face frozen in time. The memory cut deeper than he'd expected. A sudden sound outside his window shattered his thoughts. Woo! Woo! The distinct call of an owl. Dele froze. A chill crawled up his spine. He turned his head slowly, eyes darting toward the open window. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. When the owl rings twice, it speaks of danger, Dele. Heed its wisdom. Shaking his head, he forced a laugh. Just a bird, he muttered. Yet the unease lingered. He got up, shut the window, and locked it tight. His phone buzzed, jolting him back to the present. It was a message from Nia. Good luck tomorrow. The world's watching. A small smile tugged at his lips. For all their rivalry, she always knew when to support him. He placed the phone down and glanced at the app's loading screen. For a brief moment, the progress bar glitched, flashing red. Dele frowned. That's odd, he murmured, refreshing the page. The issue disappeared, but unease settled deeper in his chest. Outside, the owl called again. The sun blazed over Lagos, turning the bustling city into a shimmering maze of glass and concrete. The rhythmic honks of Danfo buses and the clamor of street vendors competed with the mechanical hum of the tech incubator's cooling systems. Inside, the stark white walls of the AfriHealth AI office exuded an aura of ambition. Dele paced in the conference room, a sleek projector humming behind him. On the screen, the tagline glowed brightly, revolutionizing healthcare, one diagnosis at a time. He turned to face his small but determined team. We're not just launching an app tomorrow, Dele began, his deep voice steady but passionate. We're redefining healthcare in Nigeria. No more children dying because doctors don't have the right tools. No more mothers misdiagnosed because of underfunded clinics. His words hung in the air, electric. Yet behind the enthusiasm in his team's nods, there was exhaustion. They had worked tirelessly, and the pressure was palpable. As the meeting wrapped, Nia's voice cut through the room. Bold speech, Dele. But can your app actually deliver? All heads turned toward her as she leaned against the doorframe, her sharp gaze unyielding. Nia was a force, a tech genius with a vision just as grand as Dele's, and a competitor who always kept him on edge. "It's not about if," Dele shot back, a smile tugging at his lips despite her challenge. "It's about when." "Let's hope the when isn't overshadowed by a what if," she quipped, pushing off the frame and striding away. As her footsteps faded, Dele turned back to his team. "Tomorrow, we show them why we lead this industry." Outside, the faint sounds of the city mingled with the memory of his grandmother's words. He shoved the thought aside. Lagos was a city of progress, not omens.
Dele stood on the balcony of his apartment, high above the Lagos skyline. The city sprawled beneath him, a chaotic yet mesmerizing blend of light and sound. His gaze drifted beyond the skyscrapers to the horizon, where the setting sun painted the clouds in shades of gold and crimson. His thoughts wandered to the village he had left behind, a stark contrast to this buzzing metropolis. He could almost feel the rough clay walls of his childhood home, hear the soft lullabies his mother would hum as she rocked his sick brother. The familiar pang of loss tightened his chest. "You're always staring out there," a voice interrupted, pulling him back to the present. Dele turned to see Nia, her sharp features softened by the evening glow. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, her ever-present air of confidence wrapped around her like armor. "Just thinking," Dele replied, his voice quieter than usual.
Nia stepped closer, the faint click of her heels against the tiled floor echoing in the quiet. "About the village?" Dele nodded, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, and Yemi. He deserved better than what the system gave him." Her expression softened. "That's why you're doing this, right? AfriHealth AI. It's more than just a tech product for you."
"It has to be," Dele said, his voice firm. "No one should lose a sibling the way I did. If this app works, if it can save even one life." He trailed off, his fists tightening on the balcony railing.
Nia placed a hand on his arm. "It will work," she said, her tone uncharacteristically gentle. Then, with a teasing smirk, she added, "Just hope it works better than my app, or you'll never hear the end of it."
Dele chuckled, shaking his head. "Rival and supporter, huh? Make up your mind."
"That's what keeps you on your toes," she quipped, heading back inside. As Dele stared back out at the city, his mind lingered on his roots and the weight of his ambition. His dreams were big, but they came with a heavy price and an even heavier responsibility.
The dim glow of Dele's bedside clock read 2:14 a.m. Sleep had eluded him, as it often did before big milestones. He perched on the edge of his bed, elbows digging into his thighs, his phone balanced in trembling hands. The screen glowed with a swirl of headlines. AfriHealth AI revolutionizes access, and ethical minefield or medical breakthrough. His eyes flicked to the comments beneath, a cascade of opinions. X-ray machine on your phone? Yeah, right. Followed by, finally, an easy thermometer for rural areas. And what happens when the AI gets it wrong? His fingers tapped a restless rhythm against the phone's back. So many thoughts, so many opinions. Breath shallow, he let his gaze drift to the corner of the room, as if the shadows there might offer answers, or at least silence the gnawing unease clawing at his chest. The soft rustle of the breeze outside barely registered, but the distant cry of an owl did. "Woo! Woo!" Dele's chest tightened. He froze, the memory rushing in like a tide he couldn't hold back. Yemi, his younger brother, lying limp in their mother's arms. The healer's words had been grim. It's too late. The fever had burned through him, while the family searched for a doctor who could diagnose him properly, one they couldn't afford anyway. Dele had been just 12 years old, but the loss had seared itself into his soul. It was that night, sitting by Yemi's freshly dug grave, that he had made a vow. This life will not consume me. I will find a way out, and I will build something that changes lives. Now, as an adult standing at the brink of fulfilling that promise, the past tugged at him with ghostly hands. The owl's call sliced through his thoughts. Whoo! Whoo! Dele moved toward the window, heart pounding. There it was, perched on the neem tree just beyond the compound wall. Its golden eyes gleamed like warnings from another world. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. When the owl rings twice, it is a message from the ancestors. Danger looms. For a moment he hesitated. Could this be an omen? Was it a warning, like the ones he had been taught to heed as a child? "No," he whispered, shaking his head, his jaw set with determination. Superstition had no place in Lagos, no place in his life now. Just a bird.
He turned away and grabbed his phone. A message to Nia sat unsent. Any last-minute doubts before tomorrow? He deleted it, replacing it with, "None. We've got this." As he slid back into bed, the weight of his ambition drowned out the distant cry of the owl. But deep inside, a part of him wasn't so sure. A few months later, Dele sat in the dimly lit conference room, the air thick with tension. The monitor on the wall displayed a news broadcast. A reporter outside a hospital interviewing a distraught family. The words scrolling across the bottom of the screen stung like a slap. AfriHealth AI faces backlash. App misdiagnosis sparks legal action. He lowered his head into his hands, barely noticing the muted hum of the air conditioning. His assistant Femi cleared his throat hesitantly.
"Sir, the medical commissioner has called for a review, and investors are pulling out," Femi said softly, placing a file on the table.
Dele didn't respond. He felt as if the walls were closing in on him. Everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed, now seemed like it was crumbling at his feet. "Dele!" A voice called sharply from the doorway. He looked up to see Nia standing there, her arms crossed, her gaze both angry and concerned. "We need to talk." He gestured for Femi to leave and leaned back in his chair as Nia stepped inside.
"You've postponed the wedding again," she said bluntly, skipping the pleasantries. "Are you really going to keep doing this? Your app is in free fall. Your reputation is on fire. And now this?"
Dele rubbed his temples, his voice weary.
"Nia,
"This app, it's my life's work. If I don't fix it, everything will have been for nothing. I can't just walk away."
"And what about us?" she countered, her voice rising. "What about tradition, family? You think your grandmother's happy watching you throw away everything she taught you for this?" She gestured to the screen. He flinched at her words.
"It's not that simple," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I can't give up. Not now. Not after everything I've lost to get here. Yemi's death. It's what drives me."
"And what about me?" Nia asked, her voice trembling now. "Am I just something you keep postponing for later? Because tradition and culture aren't optional, Dele. They're a part of who you are, and who we are." Feeling frustrated, I am running out of excuses to tell Mama and her people. You know I am the firstborn and everyone is looking. Dele stood, pacing the room. "I don't know what you want me to do, Nia. Marry you and abandon the app? This is bigger than us." "It's not about abandoning it," she said softly, stepping closer. "It's about balance. You're trying to outrun your past, but you're losing the future in the process." He stopped pacing and looked at her, his eyes filled with conflict. Her words struck a chord, but his ambition still burned fiercely. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows through the blinds. The weight of his decision pressed on him. Success, tradition, or love. Could he have all three? Or would he lose everything trying? A few months back. The flash of cameras illuminated the grand auditorium as Dele stepped onto the stage. A massive banner hung overhead, emblazoned with the words, "AfriHealth AI, the future of healthcare in Nigeria." The crowd erupted into applause as he approached the podium, flanked by his team. "This app," Dele began, his voice steady, "represents more than just technology. It represents a promise to revolutionize healthcare and ensure that every life matters." The audience roared in approval, and Dele's chest swelled with pride. As he presented a live demonstration, the app flawlessly identified mock patient symptoms and suggested treatments. The event concluded with a standing ovation, and news outlets praised AfriHealth AI as a groundbreaking innovation. The following weeks were a whirlwind of media attention and hospital trials. Clinics reported initial success with the app, and orders poured in from across the country. Dele basked in the glow of his achievement, but the glow didn't last. A few weeks later, Dele sat in his office, staring at his phone. His inbox was flooded with complaints. App crashes during diagnosis. Incorrect results led to a severe misdiagnosis. This app is dangerous and unreliable. He rubbed his temples, his pulse quickening. His assistant, Femi, appeared at the door, his face grave. "Dele, we have a problem," Femi said, placing a stack of printed emails on the desk. "Hospitals are pulling out. Patients are filing complaints with the medical commissioner." Dele stood abruptly, pacing. "This can't be happening. We ran tests. We validated every feature." "Something's wrong with the algorithm," Femi said cautiously. "We need to act fast before this spirals further."
As if on cue, Dele's phone buzzed. The headline glaring from the screen made his stomach drop. AfriHealth AI scandal. Is technology failing Nigeria's patients? The once supportive media had turned against him, and the shadow of doubt now loomed over his dream.
That evening, Dele watched a news report showing a grieving family holding up a prescription issued by AfriHealth AI, one that had been dangerously wrong. The image burned into his mind, bringing Yemi's memory crashing back with brutal clarity. The words of his grandmother replayed in his head. When you forget the wisdom of the past, the future will remind you in painful ways. For the first time, Dele felt his confidence wavering. Could he salvage the app and prove its worth? Or had his ambition blinded him to something deeper? Dele stared at the whiteboard in the conference room, its surface a chaotic mess of equations, flowcharts, and hastily scribbled ideas. The weight of the app's troubles bore down on him like a physical force. He heard the door creak open, but didn't turn.
Still at it, huh? A familiar voice said.
Dele turned to see Tayo, his longtime business partner, stepping into the room. He carried 2 steaming cups of coffee, one of which he set on the table beside Dele. "Thanks," Dele muttered, taking the cup but not drinking from it. Tayo pulled out a chair and sat down, his casual demeanor a stark contrast to Dele's tension.
"You know, when we started this in the dorm, all we worried about was passing our exams and paying for jollof rice." He chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. Dele allowed himself a small smile. "Yeah, and now it's lawsuits and bad press. Some upgrade, huh?" Tayo leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "We've been through worse, Dele. Remember that time our prototype fried the computer in the engineering lab? I thought we'd be expelled for sure."
Dele chuckled despite himself, the memory pulling him momentarily from his current despair. "Yeah, but this is different, Tayo. People are losing trust in us. In me. This isn't just some school project anymore." Tayo's expression grew serious. "You're right, it's not. But we built this together, brick by brick. We didn't come this far to let it fall apart now. Whatever's going on, we'll fix it."
Dele sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not just the app, Tayo. It's everything. Nia, tradition, my family's expectations. It's like I'm being pulled in 1,000 directions, and I don't know if I can hold it all together."
Tayo placed a hand on Dele's shoulder. "Listen, bro. You've carried the weight of this company and everyone's expectations for years. You don't have to do it alone. I've got your back always. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out. Together."
Dele looked at Tayo, a glimmer of gratitude softening his features. "Thanks, Tayo. I don't say it enough, but I couldn't have done any of this without you."
Tayo grinned, standing up and grabbing a marker. "Don't get too sentimental on me, boss. Now let's get back to work before this whiteboard turns into modern art." For the first time in days, Dele felt a spark of hope. With Tayo by his side, the dream he had nurtured since Yemi's death felt less like an impossible burden and more like a shared mission. Dele's office was bathed in the pale glow of computer monitors, the room silent except for the rhythmic tapping of keys. Screens flashed error logs and lines of code, each one taunting him with problems he couldn't solve fast enough. "This doesn't make any sense," he muttered, running a hand over his face. A knock on the door broke his focus. He looked up to see Nia standing there, holding her laptop. Her expression was guarded, but there was a flicker of determination in her eyes.
"Looks like you could use some help," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Dele raised an eyebrow. "Help from my biggest rival? This should be good." Nia smirked, setting her laptop on his desk. "Don't flatter yourself. This isn't about you. It's about fixing the mess your app is making before it drags the entire industry down with it."
Dele crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair. "And why would you care? Your app's next in line to dominate if mine fails." "True," Nia said, sitting across from him. "But I'm not about to succeed because you crashed and burned. That's not how I win." Dele studied her for a moment, then sighed. "Fine. What have you got?" Nia pulled up a series of reports, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I've been tracking your app's glitches for weeks. The pattern isn't random. It's deliberate."
Dele leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Deliberate? You think someone's sabotaging it?"
"Not just someone," Nia said, her tone sharp. "Someone inside your team. The way the glitches cascade through the system, it's like a virus planted in the code. If we compare it to my app's framework, I might be able to trace the source."
Dele hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let's do it."
The hours blurred together as they worked side by side, their competitive edges dissolving in the face of a common goal. Nia's sharp wit cut through Dele's frustrations.
while his deep knowledge of the app's architecture provided the insights she needed to trace the anomalies. At one point, Naya leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms. You know, this reminds me of the hackathon back at the incubator. You hated me for winning that. Dele chuckled, shaking his head. Hated you? No. Respected you? Absolutely. Still do. She glanced at him, her expression softening. Good. Because you're going to need me to fix this mess. Dele smirked, the tension between them easing just slightly. And here I thought I was the genius. Let's see if your genius holds up, she said, turning her attention back to her screen. As the night wore on, the cracks in their rivalry revealed a partnership built on mutual respect and undeniable chemistry. Dele began to realize that, for all their differences, Nia was the only one who could challenge him, and maybe the only one who could help him save his dream. The soft glow of the monitors in the AfriHealth AI lab lit up Dele's tense face. His eyes scanned the lines of code, frustration mounting with every error he uncovered. Naya sat beside him, her brow furrowed in concentration. The air between them was thick with tension, but not from rivalry. This time, it was something far more unsettling. Here, Nia said, breaking the silence. She pointed to a section of the code. This sequence, it doesn't belong here. It's a back door. Dele leaned closer, his heart sinking. A back door? You're saying someone built an entry point to manipulate the app? Exactly, Naya confirmed, her voice grim. And it's not just random sabotage. The way it's designed, it's targeting the core algorithm, the one you said was your breakthrough. Dele clenched his jaw. The core algorithm was the heart of AfriHealth AI, the part he had poured his soul into. To see it tampered with felt like a personal betrayal. Who could do this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Naya hesitated, then said, Someone who knows your system inside out. Someone on your team. Dele's stomach churned. The team he had built from scratch. The people he trusted most. Could one of them really be behind this? They worked through the night, tracing the malicious code. Every lead seemed to point back to someone on the inside. By dawn, they had uncovered a trail of suspicious activity. Unauthorized logins, altered timestamps, and hidden files. It's not just your app, Naya said, breaking the heavy silence. She turned her laptop to show her own diagnostics. Whoever's doing this is using pieces of my technology too. They're not just sabotaging us. They're building something bigger. Dele stared at the screen, the realization hitting him like a punch to the gut. So this isn't just about ruining AfriHealth AI. It's about using our work for their own agenda. And they're doing a damn good job of it, Naya added. Dele leaned back in his chair, exhaustion etched into his face. If it's someone on my team, I need to find out who. And fast. Nia nodded, her eyes locking with his. This changes everything. We can't trust anyone right now. Dele's mind raced, replaying every interaction with his team, searching for signs he might have missed. Tayo's unwavering support flashed in his memory, but even that felt fragile under the weight of this revelation. We'll figure this out, Dele said, more to himself than to Naya. But if someone's using our work for something dangerous, we need to stop them. Together. Naya held his gaze for a moment before nodding. Together. The first light of dawn seeped through the blinds as they turned back to their screens, their partnership solidified by a shared determination to uncover the truth. But the cracks in Dele's trust had begun to widen, and the weight of betrayal loomed heavy in the air. Dele's office was in chaos. Stacks of papers were strewn across his desk, monitors flashed news headlines, and his phone buzzed incessantly with calls he couldn't bring himself to answer. The latest headline blared across the screen on the wall. AfriHealth AI faces collapse. Investors flee amid scandal. The words stung more than he cared to admit. Every day, it seemed, another investor pulled out. Another article slashed at his company's credibility. A sharp knock at the door pulled him from his spiraling thoughts. Tayo walked in, his face etched with anger. We need to talk, Tayo said, shutting the door firmly behind him. Dele leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. If this is about the investors, this is about Nia, Tayo interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension. Dele frowned, sitting up straighter. What about her? Tayo dropped a folder on the desk, its contents spilling out. Email logs, timestamps, and snippets of code. She's the problem, Dele. Look at this. The timing of the glitches, the patterns. They all started after you let her in on our system. Dele stared at the papers, his heart sinking. You think Nia's sabotaging us? I don't just think it.
I know it, Tayo said, his tone firm. She's your competitor, Dele. She has everything to gain from our failure. Dele shook his head, but doubt began to creep in. She's been helping us, Tayo. Without her, we wouldn't have uncovered half of this. Helping? Tayo scoffed. Or covering her tracks. Think about it. She has access to everything now. What if she's the one feeding this to the media, pulling the strings behind the scenes? She's playing you, man. Dele's chest tightened. He wanted to defend Nia, but Tayo's words struck a nerve. Was he too blinded by his feelings for her to see the truth? She's not good for you, Dele, Tayo continued, his voice softer now. This whole thing between you two, it's clouding your judgment. You need to cut her out before she drags you down completely. Dele stood, his jaw clenched. I need proof, Tayo. If you're accusing her of something this serious, I need more than suspicion. Tayo sighed, gesturing to the folder. The proof is there. You just don't want to see it. As Tayo left, Dele sank back into his chair, the weight of the accusations pressing down on him. He glanced at the photo on his desk. Him and Nia at a tech event, both smiling, full of ambition. The doubt gnawed at him. Was Nia really behind the sabotage? Or was Tayo letting his own distrust twist the narrative? Outside the window, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the storm raging in Dele's mind. And for the first time, Dele felt completely untethered, unsure of who he could trust. The quiet hum of the cafe was at odds with the storm brewing inside Dele. He sat across from Nia, the space between them vast despite the small table. Their laptops sat closed, untouched, as the conversation neither had wanted to have finally unfolded. Nia sipped her coffee, her eyes downcast. So, this is it then? She asked, her voice soft but steady. Dele nodded, his throat tight. I think it's for the best. The app, the company, it's all falling apart. I need to focus on fixing this mess. And you think cutting me out will fix it? She said, her tone carrying a faint edge. It's not about cutting you out, Dele said, rubbing the back of his neck. It's about clarity. There's too much noise. Too much confusion. I can't afford to let my feelings for you complicate things any further. Nia leaned back, studying him. Is this about Tayo? Did he convince you I'm the villain in all of this? Dele hesitated, then shook his head. It's not about him. It's about what's happening to the company, to the app. I need to figure out who's sabotaging it, and I need to do it alone. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. You don't have to do it alone, Dele. You're choosing to. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Finally, Nia stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. I hope you figure it out, Dele, and I hope it's worth it. As she walked away, the weight of the decision pressed on him like a vice. The one person who had understood his drive, his ambition, was now gone. Dele's phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. It was a call from Adekunle Ventures, his last major investor. Hello? Dele answered, his voice wary. The voice on the other end was curt, almost detached. Mr. Dele, we've reviewed the latest developments with AfriHealth AI. Given the ongoing controversies and instability, we regret to inform you that we're withdrawing our funding effective immediately. Dele's heart sank. Please, give me more time. We're close to resolving the issues. I'm sorry, Mr. Dele. The board has made its decision. Best of luck. The line went dead. Dele lowered the phone, staring blankly at the screen. The last pillar holding up his dream had crumbled. The cafe around him blurred, the sounds of conversations and clinking cups fading into the background. He was alone, his company in ruins, and his future uncertain. Dele sat on the floor of his darkened apartment, the faint glow of the city filtering through the blinds. The room was a mess. Papers, books, and empty coffee cups strewn across the floor. His laptop sat closed on the coffee table, its silence deafening. For the first time in years, Dele didn't have a plan. He leaned his head back against the wall, staring at the ceiling as the weight of his failures bore down on him. No investors, no app, no Nia. The dreams he'd nurtured since Yemi's death felt impossibly distant, like a cruel joke played by fate. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind, a memory from long ago. When the owl rings twice, it speaks of danger, but it also speaks of wisdom. Listen, Dele. The ancestors guide us if we are willing to hear. Danger, he muttered bitterly to himself. What good is wisdom when everything's already gone? The silence was broken by a soft whoo, whoo. Dele froze, his chest tightening. Slowly, he turned his head toward the window. The owl was there, perched on the ledge just outside. Its golden eyes gleamed, unblinking, as though it could see straight into his soul. "You again?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me?" The owl tilted its head, its gaze steady. In the stillness, Dele felt something stir within him. A memory of sitting at his grandmother's feet, listening to her stories about balance, respect, and tradition. "If you lose sight of where you come from," she had told him, "you'll lose your way, no matter how far you go." Dele's throat tightened. He had spent so much of his life chasing success, desperate to prove himself, that he had ignored the very roots that had shaped him. His ambition had blinded him to the warnings, the omens, the wisdom his ancestors had tried to impart. "I failed," he said aloud, his voice cracking. "I failed Yemi. I failed the app. I failed Nia." The owl let out another soft call, its wings rustling as it shifted slightly. To Dele, it felt less like judgment and more like acknowledgement, as though it was saying, "You have lost your way, but you can still find it." He stood slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. Moving to the window, he opened it. The owl remained for a moment longer, then took off into the night, its wings cutting through the air in graceful silence. Dele watched it disappear into the darkness. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of clarity pierced the fog of his despair. If he was going to salvage what was left of his life, he needed to start by acknowledging his mistakes, not just in technology, but in how he had ignored the very foundation of his upbringing. He sat back down, pulled out a notebook, and began to write. Not code, but words, plans, thoughts, a way forward that blended his ambition with the values he had neglected for so long. The night stretched on, but for the first time, Dele felt the faintest glimmer of hope. The faint morning light streamed through the blinds in Dele's apartment, highlighting the cluttered remnants of his sleepless nights. His notebook lay open on the table, pages filled with scribbled plans and corrections, but clarity had eluded him. He picked up his phone, the weight of it unfamiliar in his hand, thumb hovering over Nia's name and his contacts. The silence in the room pressed against him, heavy and thick, interrupted only by the occasional creak of the building settling. His chest tightened as he imagined her voice on the other end, warm but distant, a reminder of what used to be. The screen dimmed, and he set the phone down again, the stillness swallowing him whole. He hadn't spoken to her since they parted ways. He was really missing her. She filled a certain void no one else could feel. The decision was made for him when the phone buzzed in his hand. An unknown number. Hesitant, he answered. "Dele, it's me." Nia's voice came through, firm but urgent. He straightened. "Nia? Why are you calling from a different number?" "I've been digging into the sabotage," she said, ignoring his question. "And I found something you need to see. Can you meet me at the incubator in an hour?" Dele hesitated. "Why are you still working on this? I thought we—" "Just meet me," she interrupted. Her tone left no room for argument. An hour later, Dele stood in the familiar space of the tech incubator, the place where his dreams of AfriHealth AI had first taken shape. Nia was waiting for him, her laptop open, lines of code filling the screen. "I've traced the source of the sabotage," she began without preamble. "It wasn't just random tampering. Someone has been planting false leads in your system for months." Dele frowned, leaning over the screen. "False leads? To what end?" "To make it look like I was behind it," Nia said, her voice tight. "Your team logs show someone accessing files during hours only Tayo was in the office. He used my credentials to cover his tracks." Dele stepped back, his chest tightening. "Tayo? No, that can't be right." Nia met his gaze, her expression a mix of anger and compassion. "I know it's hard to believe, but look at the timestamps, the patterns. It's him, Dele. He's been sabotaging you from the inside." Dele's mind raced. Memories of Tayo's unwavering support now seemed tinged with something darker. His insistence that Nia couldn't be trusted, his growing tension as the app faltered. "I trusted him," Dele murmured, the weight of betrayal hitting him like a punch to the gut. Nia placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. "I know. And I know this is a lot to take in, but we don't have time to dwell on it. If we don't act now, he's going to use your app and mine for whatever scheme he's been planning." Dele took a deep breath, her words sinking in. "Why are you still helping me, Nia? After everything I said, after I pushed you away." Nia gave him a small, wry smile. "Because I know you, Dele. I know why you're doing this. And because
Despite everything, I still believe in you. Her words cut through the doubt and guilt that had been weighing him down. For the first time in weeks, Dele felt steady, like the ground beneath him wasn't about to crumble. "We need to secure the app," he said, his voice firm. "And we need to expose Tayo." Nia nodded. "I've already started updating your security protocols. But we need something more. A way to blend your technology with safeguards that can't be tampered with." Dele's thoughts flashed to his grandmother's stories, the wisdom of tradition he had dismissed for so long. "We integrate cultural knowledge," he said slowly, "things Tayo wouldn't think to interfere with. And we rebuild trust with our users by showing them the balance between technology and tradition." Nia smiled. "Now that sounds like the Dele I know." As they worked side by side, Dele felt a renewed sense of purpose. Nia's unwavering support had pulled him back from the brink, and her commitment had shown him the power of trust and partnership. Together, they were stronger, and they were ready to face whatever came next. The large conference hall buzzed with anticipation, a sea of reporters, investors, and healthcare professionals waiting for the relaunch of AfriHealth AI. Bright spotlights illuminated the stage, where a massive screen displayed the app's logo alongside a new tagline: "Innovation rooted in trust." Dele stood backstage, adjusting the microphone clipped to his jacket. Beside him, Nia reviewed her notes, her expression calm and composed. Their partnership, once fractured, now felt unshakable. "You ready?" she asked, glancing at him. He nodded, his jaw tight with determination. "Let's do this." They stepped onto the stage to a round of applause. Dele took a deep breath and began, his voice steady despite the nerves swirling in his chest. "Thank you all for being here," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Today is more than just a relaunch. It's a moment of accountability and renewal." The crowd murmured in curiosity, but Dele pressed on. "Over the past months, AfriHealth AI faced challenges that shook the very foundation of our mission. We uncovered sabotage, deliberate tampering with our system, designed to undermine trust in our app." A ripple of shock spread through the audience. Dele paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But we didn't face this challenge alone," he continued, gesturing to Nia. "Nia's expertise and determination were instrumental in uncovering the truth. And today, we want to share that truth with you." Nia stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "The sabotage originated from within the company itself. Evidence points directly to someone who had intimate knowledge of the system and access to its core architecture." The lights dimmed, and the screen behind them lit up with security footage and digital logs. The audience watched as timestamps and access records painted a damning picture. Dele's voice hardened. "That person is Tayo, my business partner." A collective gasp swept through the room. Dele's chest tightened, but he pushed forward. "Tayo exploited our trust to plant vulnerabilities and frame Nia for the issues. His motivations were personal: greed, ambition, and an unwillingness to share the success we worked so hard for." The screen transitioned to a live feed of Tayo being escorted from the building by security. Dele's voice softened as he addressed the crowd. "This betrayal was devastating, but it taught us a valuable lesson. Trust, transparency, and a commitment to ethical innovation are the cornerstones of progress." He gestured to the screen again, now displaying the sleek, revamped AfriHealth AI interface. Vibrant icons pulsed gently against a calming backdrop, designed for intuitive navigation. He tapped the Check Symptoms button, and a soft, soothing voice guided the demonstration. "As you can see," he said, "users can input their symptoms or even snap a photo of something like a rash. The AI analyzes the data instantly, drawing on a library of verified medical knowledge, and provides actionable advice. For instance, if someone reports a fever and a persistent cough, it doesn't just suggest remedies. The app displayed a summary: likely cause, respiratory infection, recommended action, seek medical attention within 24 hours. He clicked through to the next screen. Here's the key part. The app immediately notifies the nearest doctor's office or clinic, sending them the preliminary data securely. That way, they can prepare for the patient's visit, or even follow up proactively. The interface updated again, showing a confirmation. Your data has been securely sent to Dr. Ayodele's office. Please visit promptly for further care. Dele turned to the audience, his voice steady but impassioned. This isn't about letting people stay home when they're sick. It's about bridging the gap, making sure the technology doesn't just inform, but connects. And we're building trust, ensuring no one feels they have to navigate their health journey alone. Nia stepped forward, demonstrating more apps' new features, which emphasized community-based healthcare solutions
and culturally tailored diagnostics. The crowd listened intently, their initial skepticism giving way to intrigue and admiration. As the presentation concluded, the room erupted into applause. Reporters rushed forward, investors murmured among themselves, and Dele felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Backstage, Dele and Nia exchanged a glance. "We did it," he said, a rare smile breaking across his face. "We did," she replied, her eyes shining with pride. For the first time in months, Dele felt like the future was his to shape. And this time, he wouldn't face it alone. A few days later, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the quiet village cemetery. The rhythmic chirping of crickets mixed with the distant laughter of children playing in a nearby field. Dele and Nia walked side by side, their steps slow and deliberate. The weight of the past and the promise of the future intertwined in their silence. They stopped in front of a small, weathered gravestone. The name Yemi Johnson was etched into the stone, along with the words, "Beloved son and brother." Dele knelt, gently brushing away a few fallen leaves. "Hey, Yemi," he said softly, his voice carrying a mix of grief and resolve. "It's been a while. I've been busy, but I think you'd be proud of what we've done." Nia crouched beside him, placing a small bouquet of wildflowers on the grave. She said nothing, letting Dele's words fill the space between them. Dele's voice faltered for a moment as he continued. "I made mistakes, Yemi. I got so caught up in the dream that I forgot why I started in the first place. But I'm trying to do better now. For you, for all the people who deserve a chance." Nia placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "You've come so far, Dele, and you're not doing it alone anymore." He looked at her, gratitude softening his features. "Thank you, Nia, for everything." As they stood, the distant laughter of children grew louder. Dele turned to see a group of them chasing a makeshift ball, their joy unbridled and infectious. He smiled, the sight filling him with a sense of purpose. "We're going to save lives," he said, his voice firm. "That's what all of this is for." Nia nodded, her gaze following his. "And we'll do it together." Above them, perched silently on a low-hanging branch, was an owl. Its golden eyes seemed to gleam with quiet approval, a watchful guardian over the moment. Dele glanced up, his breath catching for a moment, but this time, he didn't feel fear. Instead, he felt peace. Hand in hand, Dele and Nia walked away from the grave, their path illuminated by the fading light of the day. Behind them, the laughter of children echoed, a reminder of the lives they had vowed to protect and improve. And as the owl watched them disappear into the horizon, it let out a soft, solitary call. Woo! Woo! Thank you for watching and listening to this short story written and read by us to you. Have you been betrayed before? Leave us a comment telling us where you are watching from and if you want part 2 of this story.